everyone. Chag Sameach. For those of you that I do not know, I see one or two familiar faces and names on here, but I'm sure there are Cantor at Washington Hebrew congregation. And I am so thrilled to delve into a bit of musical midrash with all of you this afternoon. So first of all, Chag Sameach. And I hope that even though we can't sing together when we study virtually, I hope that you are ready to raise your voices while you're on mute, as we dig a little bit into both the midrash itself and um, and what music adds to it. And so I'm going to ask everyone, just even though we can't engage, I feel so funny going back to virtual study, even when it's for such a good reason. Um, I want to invite everyone to share just a word or two in the chat. What is something that you've learned today that has really made you think? Just a word or two in the chat. What's something new that you've learned today? So that we all have a chance to look through the chat and relate to one another and not just be boxes on a screen. So unless you are in your car, please don't write anything in the chat if you're in the car, but otherwise, share just a little something as we begin. I see a few things. I'm sure we'll get to more as we go. But I am going to go ahead and begin my screen share so that we can delve into, oh goodness, except I just lost, sorry. I swear I remember how to do this. Um, my my PowerPoint just closed itself, so I'm going to pull it back up. Please bear with me. I apologize. There we go. Now, if I can get the screen share going, that will be great. I apologize. I had this all set up and ready to go, and then my technology and I disagreed. Here we are. Should be in. Hopefully you're able to see that in presenter mode, or at least it's visible and legible.
It looks like it's in slide mode.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
You'd think I've never done virtual learning before. There we are. Thank you, Lily. So before we dig into Midrash and the music around it, right? When we talk about Midrash, we know that we can be, I don't want to assume how familiar we are or not in this space, but we can assume we are either talking about the ancient writings of rabbis who asked a question of the Torah and said, this is not answered in our rather terse text. Or we can be looking at a more contemporary commentary it doesn't have to be these ancient texts that we often think of as the formal canonized Midrash. But then we also look at music itself as Midrash. We have this incredible opportunity to engage with stories in a new way when we engage in musical Midrash. And so we have this beautiful quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks that I like to use as my kavanah when I do study in musical Midrash. Um, he says, faith is more like music than science. Science analyzes, music integrates. And as music connects note to note, so faith connects episode to episode, life to life, age to age, in a timeless melody that breaks into time. God is the composer and librettist. We are each called on to be voices in the choir, singers of God's song. Faith is the ability to hear the music beneath the noise. So music is a signal of transcendence. The history of the Jewish spirit is written in its song. So I'm going to start us with a very familiar story, I think, to everyone in this room, I'm guessing, with Lech Lecha. In Genesis 12, in Breshit 12, we read, Adonai said to Avram, go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And I think we often think about this as such an obvious part of our story because we know it so well. We think about the immediacy of the story itself and God's promise, right? Go forth and I shall make you a great people. But we don't always necessarily think about everything that the people were being asked to, that Abraham and Sarah really were being asked to leave behind. And so as we look at this very familiar story, I always also want to look at a very familiar piece of music that I expect you will all know. And I'll ask you to sing it with me. I think it's probably our best known musical setting to do with this particular story in the Torah, Lechi Lach. And I'll invite you all to, come on, to go ahead and sing. I know you're all muted, but sing with me anyway. And I hope, I apologize, I'm going to pull up chords, which I'm probably taking it out of the presenter view in order to do that, but rather than having multiple screens where I'm looking away from you all the time. Thank you for bearing with me. But let's sing this incredibly familiar and I imagine for many of us comforting song. Lechi lach, to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. Lechi on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing. Lechi lach. Lechi lach, and I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechi lach, to the place that I will show you. L'simchat chayim, לשמחת חיים, לשמחת חיים, לכי לך. And you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi la. Now that it's fresh in our ears and fresh in our memories, I'd love to hear what other than familiarity does this song evoke for you? Feel free to unmute yourselves and share.
Hey, I just wanted to mention, I don't think your original sound is on. The guitar
Oh,
was
gosh.
super garbled, and the vocals were kind of doing that fall off at the end.
Thank you for letting me know. I thought I had turned it
Yeah,
on, but it
I
might
would
have
I would have
actually.
stopped you sooner, but I was unable to unmute. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
It
Thank you for
sounded
telling
fine to me. It sounded fine to me.
me. Okay, I have original sound turned on. I don't know
Did
why it
you
didn't.
go to uncheck automatically adjust microphone volume in
Yep,
the audio settings?
I did.
That
I didn't know
So
what's going.
sometimes for
is
some
there
it sounds and others let's let our teacher teach and we'll see if we can't help make sound, but we want to make sure that we can
Yeah,
focus on your teaching, which we're so fortunate to have you here.
thank you, Rabbi. Dan, go ahead. Dan is one of mine, by the way.
Hi there. Um, Aside from being my son's Torah portion for his bar mitzvah, it evokes a sense of calm. I mean, for Abraham to have to completely uproot, I know my son is moving now from Phoenix to Dallas, and it's stressful, and we're in modern times. So to completely uproot had got to have been scary and aggravating. And the melody that Debbie Friedman created for this is soothing. It's calming. And it makes you think that, wherever you're going to end up, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's already a midrash on this story, right? Debbie's midrash, Debbie Friedman's midrash here is to highlight the sureness and calmness that that she believes Avram and Sarah felt, or at least Avram, right? Ellen, please.
Wait, is that me?
I see, I don't see a last name. I just see a
Yeah.
hand.
Okay, so it's somebody else.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I just want to shout out to Debbie Friedman and the Celestial Realms. Just say that you did some good work here because so many people, myself included, millions have been affected, and so much of our Friday nights and Saturday mornings and whatever other days of the week we play her music. It's really shifted so much in how we hear and listen and feel spirit. And I'm just grateful.
We are incredibly lucky to have had her influence. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ellen. And I'll ask that because I'm in screen share mode, if you have a comment to share, raise your hand. Now we have Ellen Messer, please.
So first of all, thank you. And so when I've offered Divrei Torah on this portion on Lech Lecha, it just has so much meaning to kind of pick up to really embrace her emphases. and to raise questions about what does it mean to be a blessing? How do we know if we're a blessing? And it's been just tremendously meaningful. And in my traditional minyan, the people were not used to having people, sing out in the Devar Torah. But I did this, and I think people, just appreciated. They were able to really focus on these topics of blessing. And whether it's calming, I don't know. But certainly just it's uplifting in terms of blessing and looking forward, even though there's uncertainty.
Absolutely. So that uplift, I actually want to pinpoint that a little bit because it is certainly an uplifting melody, right? But unless you are a musician and you think in music theory terms and music analysis terms, you may not have actually thought about the structure of this melody, right? It's beautiful, and whether you're hearing it for the first time or you've heard it, for as long as you can remember, there's a pull to it, right? When we think in terms of music, it's all about tension and resolution. And this melody in particular, the resolution is pulling towards up, right? We start Lechi lach to a land that I will show you. But then the next phrase starts low again and goes a little higher. Lech lecha to a place you do not know. And then all the way up to the top. Lechi lach, on your journey I will bless you, right? Then, once you have reached that pinnacle, you shall be a blessing, right? And so it is representative both of the journey, right? The climb that we all take, but also that Jewish spirit of rising in resilience. That part of the reason this song has become such a classic for everyone who knows Debbie Friedman's music is that the pull up is resonant with Avram and Sarai's story. It is resonant with Jewish history and Jewish spirit. And it is resonant with the way that study of Torah is meant to lift our spirits. Dan, is this a new comment?
Yes, and then I'll shut up, I promise. She knows I. It also, first of all, the music gives soul to the words, gives the words a soul. And when my son had his bris, we had a very traditional moil, and we had sort of a pre-service, and we included this, and he could not fathom why. I mean, I think this talks obviously about Avram and Sarai, but it talks about all of us. I mean, we're all on a life journey. And I was using his bris and this song to represent what his life journey will be. That God hopefully will be with him and all of us throughout that journey. And wherever we end up, it'll be good. And it was just a shame that from such a traditional perspective, he couldn't see that. For me, though, that's part and parcel to what the whole song is.
Right. And it's interesting, I often recently actually have started getting requests for this song even to be sung at funerals. That it is not that it is appropriate for so many people. It resonates in so many different moments in life throughout the entire life cycle. I want to delve back in to a little bit of Hebrew grammar nerding so that we can understand a bit more deeply what Debbie Friedman was doing with this piece. Because what is the name of the parsha? Lech lecha, right? Go yourself, go forth. What is the name of the song? Lechi lach. The same exact words, but grammatically in the feminine. right? Lichi lach, to a land that I will show you. Go yourself in the feminine. And then lech lecha, go yourself in the masculine. Now in the Torah, God is speaking only to Abraham, right? Or to Avram, as his name still is at that point. However, I like to think of this beginning in the feminine as Debbie's way of writing Sarai into this moment in the story. We so often wonder, or maybe we don't all, I shouldn't say that. I often wonder when I read this parsha, what was Sarai thinking, right? God spoke to her husband. They're in their 80s and said, go off on this adventure, go to this place. I'm not going to tell you what it is until you get there. And then I'll tell you when you've arrived. And my promise is I'll make you a blessing. I'll make you a great people. And so then Avram goes to Sarai and says, okay, we're going. We're leaving behind everything we've ever known, God said, and we're going to go. And what we have here now is this invitation from Debbie to write Sarai into this invitation from God. That it wasn't just Lech Lecha Avram, and anyone who goes with you, but, right, Lechilach Sarai and Lech Lecha Avram. And what a different feeling we get from that than just Lech Lecha. I'm seeing lots of comments in the chat. Does anyone want to jump in and share verbally? You don't need to hear that much of my voice, I swear.
I think it's also about each one of us integrating the male and female within us. You know, for me, that's what I'm getting.
Yes.
You know, and then we're all more balanced people. And then we can like reconcile all the parts of ourselves and be at peace, deep peace within ourselves. And we can go out into the world and offer that essence to other people, you know. So once again, thank you, Debbie.
Absolutely. And in so many ways, she was ahead of her time. Right. No one at that point, when she wrote this piece, was asking, well, how do we include our non-binary siblings into the Hebrew language? No one had really gotten that far in inclusion yet. But by including Lechilach and Lech Lecha, we can think of that as there is a biblical tool known as a merism, where we list, when we read at the very beginning of Breshit, right, there was day and there was evening and there was morning the first day. We assume from context that it wasn't just evening and morning, but everything that came in between to be that first day, right? And so we can also read male and female, God created them, to understand that as a merism, the spectrum of everything that comes in between, not simply the two binary proposition. And so the same applies when we look at this lechilach, lech lecha. Was this Debbie's way of including all genders in this call to go forth, regardless of how we begin? Do we have any other comments on this before we move on to another piece of music and another piece of Midrash?
I have just one quick comment. This is Ben on blessing.
Yes.
This is not my teaching. This is my friend and colleague, Rabbi Sue Fendrick, did this in her senior sermon. So how do you be a blessing? And her quick, very elegant answer is, for all our mitzvot, ben adam l'chavero, all the commandments of actions between people, visiting the sick, burying the dead, celebrating the bride, there's no bracha. You don't say a bracha on those occasions. You are the bracha. You are literally being the bracha on those moments. And she presumed that both Avraham and Sarah understood that already as their charge, that they would now live a life where they would, their maasim tovim, their good acts, would be literally brachot and manifest in that way.
Right. It comes back to the idea of na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will understand, right? We often bless and then do, and yet we can't understand the blessing of what it is until we have done the thing. And it is our actions themselves and our lives themselves that become the blessing.
Suzanne, can I ask a question?
Sure. Hi, Frank.
How are you?
Fine, how
I
are
am
you?
focusing on the very first line,
Mhm.
Leki la to a land that I will show you. What does that mean to everybody? How do you interpret that? What is the land that I will show you?
Why did this just skip ahead too? So the actual, I'm going to go back a slide, right? This is actually the direct text of the Tanakh, right? Vayomer Adonai el Avraham, lech lecha me'artzecha umibeit avicha, umimoladcha umibeit avicha, el haaretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. Which is to say, this is a space that you're not going to know until I tell you that you have arrived, right? I will bring you there and I will show it to you. But this is as yet a mystery. It's demanding a leap of faith.
All right, so it's set up that way on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so then when we take that, right, almost verbatim from the Torah, except that we have inverted the gender of the Torah text. Lechilach, to a land that I will show you, is giving us verbatim Torah, except in the feminine first, right? And then expanding on it, lech lecha, to a land you do not know, right?
Having just finished the story of the Exodus, I listened to the lines not with reference to Abraham, but with reference to Moses, that God will take him on a journey where he will show you a land that you do not know. He will not enter the land, but the final destination is to be able to see the land that will be given.
Which is certainly Moses's journey. And absolutely, we get to read intertextually. That's part of how we study Torah, right? Even though Avram had no idea what would follow him, we can read this with the knowledge of what would come for Moses on his journey. Absolutely. And yes, it is a huge relationship of trust. Susanna wrote in the chat. Absolutely true. And I think, to me, this ever-reaching melody and then settling down on that, you shall be a blessing, lechilach, is remarkably powerful in that leap of faith, right? We think of the stretch and the leap and the distance, and we hear it in the music. But then there's that assurance. Lechi lach. It's so simple, right? So I always like to start studying musical midrash with something that is familiar to all of us so that we can then dig into something that we are totally unfamiliar with. I hope this is new for most, if not all of you. But we're going to stay in these stories of Abraham and Sarah, but instead of the very beginning of their story, we are going to actually jump to the very end of Sarah's story. We have a midrash that follows the Akedah. The ancient interpreters of Torah often midrashically connected two things that may or may not have anything to do with each other as far as the text actually says, based on proximity. And when we read Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, the immediate following parsha is Chaye Sarah. It is our one parsha that is named for a woman. It means the life of Sarah, but it actually begins with the death of Sarah. And going from the Akedah to Sarah's death, I'm going to pause my screen share for just a moment so that I can be seen, because you don't need to. We have a nice little picture of the Akedah, but what we find is one of the most famous midrashot. The ancient rabbis connected the two stories and said the fact that Sarah dies immediately after the binding of Isaac, and we have no text in the Torah about her ever speaking to Isaac or Abraham ever again. Clearly, these must be linked. Clearly, these two go hand in hand. These are part and parcel of the same moment in our story. And we have a midrash that says Satan, right, who we would pronounce in English as Satan, right, the divine adversary, as it were, shows Sarah a vision of what is happening with the Akedah, but does not show her the conclusion. He does not show her that her son survives. And instead, she believes that her husband has killed their son, their only son, and she dies of a broken heart. And so, as I bring up a piece of music, rather than singing this one, I'm going to play it for you. I am really fighting with my technology today. I apologize for the delay, but we will get there. Okay. And now I really hope that the sound actually shares the way that I intend it to. All here? I went down to the river so wide. Satan was standing on the other side. He said to me, look and see. I saw you with our only child, with a knife in your hand and your eyes so wild, on the mountain top. And then the vision stopped. My love, what have you done? And where have you taken my only son? Some terrible place where I can't see his face. All these years I've been a faithful wife, and I gave you a child so late in my life. My time was done when I bore you a son. And put me to bed, 'cause the sun is in the sky, but it's dark inside my head. And I don't care if I don't wake up, if I can be with the one I love. I went down to the river so wide. Satan was standing on the other side. He said to me, look and see. But hush, little baby, don't you cry, 'cause I'll be waiting on the other side. You won't be alone. I'll make you feel like home. So that was River So Wide by a duo called Girls in Trouble. And before I talk about who they are and what they do, I just want everyone who feels comfortable, put in the chat a 1 or 2 word first reaction before you read anybody else's, just initial reaction. So we have a pretty wide range of initial reactions, right? For some of us, it sounds really peaceful and soothing. Some of us are just, yep, absolutely folk music. The initial, right, this straight to the interpretation, perhaps Sarah died to be with him, to be with her son. Right? It's sad. It's even heartbreaking. A little bit gospel-y, right? We have a lot of different takes. And they're all valid. What else do we have? Yeah. And when we look at this, at the text, I'm trying to bring my screen share back and it will not work. So I'm sorry I can't put the text up in front of you. I will try to find a way to drop it all to you in the chat. But does anyone recognize it for whoever said folk music, if we have any folk music people in here, does anyone recognize the genre this song is in? It's actually in the style of an Appalachian murder ballad. I'm seeing some heads nodding. So this duo, River So Wide, yes, it is very specific. In American folk music, there is an entire genre of murder ballads that comes largely from the folk music of the Deep South. It's very closely related to bluegrass. It's closely related to American old time music. And this very narrative from the personal method of each verse is meant to be in that style, right? We are meant to be, from this setting, brought into what they think must have been Sarah's, or could have been Sarah's mindset and experience in this moment. So Girls in Trouble is a duo who write songs based off of Midrashic stories and biblical stories, specifically Jewishly. And the name comes from the fact that most of the time that women are mentioned at all in the Tanakh, they are in trouble. Otherwise, it's such a male-centric narrative. And they focus in specifically on the stories of the women of the Tanakh and bringing life to their voices. And in this case, we have this, I often, in that refrain that comes back in the middle of, oh, this is beautiful. Susanna wrote in the chat, heartbreak so wide like the water, gushes and cascades, and her grief is crashing on the rocks. She's drowning in pain, right? And yet at the same time, the very first reaction someone wrote in here was peace, right? We have this weird thing that very few things can do, but music can, and sometimes poetry can, of expressing expressing many different emotions simultaneously. Right, when I hear that ooh that comes back at the refrain each time, I think, is that because she just is in so much pain she doesn't have words? Or perhaps that's what she is singing to try to soothe Isaac. She sees her son in danger and she's trying to calm him and tell him that he'll be okay. Right, we have within the text itself, I'm sorry, my screen share has decided to stop cooperating, so I can't actually share the text with you and have everyone look at it, but we have this back and forth, this push-pull between Sarah experiencing the pain and the loss, and simultaneously wanting to be there for her son. And at the same time, the sheer shock at what her husband is doing. And so we have all of it at once. I'm going to try one more time with this screen share and see if it will cooperate. Nope, I'm giving up on it. Okay. But I'm curious, is this a midrash that was familiar to you before? Is this, and what does this setting of it evoke for you, or what deeper understanding does it bring out for you as you hear it?
All right, I'll come clean. I'm actually a rabbi and not a young rabbi. So I've known this midrash since rabbinical school. And but
Incredibly midrash.
this, what just happened, I had someone wished for me that on this Shavuot I'll learn something entirely new. And that totally happened. When in the song she says she has to be with him, and that's why she dies. Does she kill herself? Does she give up the ghost because she can no longer bear to be without him? It has the clarity of feeling like that's what this midrash really means. And midrashim don't have one meaning, but there's definitely still multivalent. But the precision with which those words were, "I love my son and I have to be with him," suddenly made why she could no longer survive so compelling. And this is the second question: is does Abraham realize why when he comes home and finds her dead? Does he get, in a very tragic moment, oh my God, I didn't kill Isaac, but I killed her?
Mm-hmm. Right. And well, I hope you'll write that midrash. Right. That is exactly the kind of question that prompts the writing of a midrash. And we can base them off of the questions prompted by other midrashot. Trisha, I saw that you wrote in the chat, no, this was not familiar, and you're not sure that you agree with it. Would you unmute and expand a little bit on that?
Well, it probably won't be acceptable to other people, but I felt like if Sarah had had more faith in God, a deeper understanding and faith in God, she would have understood there could have been a different outcome rather than jump the gun and die. She could have killed herself after she found out. She didn't have to do it before. So for me, it shows a bit of weakness, but I don't think she was weak. I think the people who wrote that down, interpreted it, were the ones who were weak.
So here's the beauty of studying Midrash. It can carry almost as much weight as Torah itself, right? It is Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we don't have to agree with it. Right? Was that a failing of Sarah's faith to believe the vision, the incomplete vision that that Satan showed her, right? We have a fallen angel who's known as the sort of the heavenly opposition, or right, and clearly is trying to be a trickster here. That is the intent of Satan in the Midrash. And again, we cannot interpret Torah without bringing ourselves to it, right? And so when we look at when we look at anything that is commentary on Torah, we both hold that it has a vast history, and that it carries great weight in Jewish tradition. And it was written by a human being, and Midrash that old was written by a man, right? We have modern Midrash that are written by all kinds of people. But the traditional early Midrashot, right? The canonical Midrashot were all written by male rabbis of a very different time. Trisha, please.
I also, to finish that thought, was I also think that it plays into how the Torah is written, where women are considered less than. So whoever interpreted it probably figured, well, this weak woman, this is what she's going to do. And I totally disagree with that. I think Sarah was probably the strongest person in that family, not the weakest, but she was so frightened by what Satan told her that she made this decision.
Right. So let's see. There was a question about the Akedah. Yes. And the beauty of having a rabbi in the class with us. It is understood to be a specific argument against child sacrifice and human sacrifice in general. Right at the time, sacrifice was the standard and accepted mode of communicating with God. No one had come up with this crazy idea of prayer to communicate with God. And in every religion, not just Judaism, or this is really pre-Judaism, but the ancient Israelite religion, every religion that surrounded practiced all kinds of ritual sacrifices. And this is actually our polemic against what every other, presumably neighboring and regional religious practice did for their deities, right? There's a huge amount historically and archaeologically, a huge amount of evidence that human sacrifice was practiced quite commonly, child and otherwise. Right? We have all of these laws in the Tanakh about how to give a sacrifice, how to slaughter an animal. The fact that it says in the Torah that we cannot cut off a limb of an animal and eat the limb and leave the animal remaining, right? That the animal has to be dead before we eat of it, tells us that in a world before refrigeration, that was probably a very common practice, right? And when we then kind of zoom out past okay, this was our lesson, this was our polemic against that, saying our neighbors might do that, but we do not. We also have to look then at the broader impact of what did we see this doing to our neighbors? Margot, please.
Yes, thank you, Cantor. One can't argue that there is anything more sincere than an actual sacrifice, because it is a life-death thing. We might try to pray with intentionality, but how often do we necessarily hit the mark as were so? The Akedah represents whether it actually went through or not, and some Midrash have it that he was actually died, and then becomes, analogous later to the sacrifice of Christ, etc. But Sarah also is sacrificed. She might not have chosen to be, and certainly she would like her son to be there throughout her long and now shortened life, but she is more than a casualty. She is a second sacrifice. And given that Abraham had already had another family to whom he also returns. The relationship with this particular mother to this particular son is really heart-wrenching. And I always appreciated, as somebody else commented, the strength of Sarah, but it's with this ballad that I actually felt empathy for her. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for listening.
Absolutely. And I think that idea that she is also a sacrifice, right, actually ties back into that choice of the genre of a murder ballad, right? The murder ballad is by definition a narrative from the victim's perspective, right? Um, that's part of the genre. And so to have this view into what her experience was, if this midrash is true, it forces us to have a different kind of compassion for her, where because she is left out of the story so much, we don't always necessarily know, right? And so I am looking at the time. We have to wrap up any moment. But I want to encourage all of you. These are just two beautiful musical midrashot that help us to write the voices of women back into our stories. And I hope that you will all find a moment, find a way to explore these midrashot, explore the ways that music can allow us to interpret and understand Torah more deeply and more personally. And I want to thank so much Temple Israel of Boston for having me. And I want to thank you all for being here and for engaging in this study with me. I wish you all a very sweet Shavuot. We have a few more hours to go, and I'm really grateful for this learning with all of you today.
And we're
Right here and we rise. All of the children rise.